Ladies and gentlemen, there is a particular kind of unease that creeps in when a political story refuses to stay in one lane. Because what unfolded around the uMkhonto weSizwe party in 2025 was not a single scandal, not a single mistake, not even a single bad month, but a relentless sequence of events so chaotic and self-inflicted that the country found itself repeatedly pausing, rewinding, and trying to understand how a party that entered parliament with real momentum managed to turn credibility into confusion at record speed. And the discomfort comes from realizing that none of this happened in isolation. It all connects, feeds on itself, and escalates. Now, the MK party arrived in national politics riding heavily on symbolism, struggle memory, and the political gravity of former President Jacob Zuma, promising order, discipline, and a corrective to what it framed as a failed system. And when it secured 58 seats in the 2024 elections, supporters believed they were witnessing the birth of a serious opposition force, one capable of reshaping debates and holding power to account, especially in KwaZulu-Natal, where emotional loyalty and historical alignment created expectations of outright dominance. But the first crack appeared when that dominance failed to materialize. Because despite winning a plurality in KZN, MK found itself locked out of provincial power by a coalition of the African National Congress, Democratic Alliance, Inkatha Freedom Party, and the NFP. A political reality check that required strategic adaptation, restraint, and long-term planning, yet instead triggered what increasingly looked like an identity crisis, as if the party could not accept that opposition sometimes means patience rather than permanent confrontation.
MK party. It's overwhelmingly clear, and it will be irresponsible of MK party leadership not to fight to defend the votes and the democratic decision and the choice made by the people of KwaZulu-Natal. So we will agitate and we will mobilize people of KwaZulu-Natal who voted for MK party to help install MK party as a legitimate government to govern KwaZulu-Natal. The numbers we are talking about, the numbers are there, it's 45%, and we would use that 45% to remove the IFPDA government with the help of the ANC and the National Freedom Party. As to who's going to vote with MK party, you will see that, but the clear intention is that the stealing of public funds that is happening now must be the last budget they are able to steal. The new budget comes on the 1st of April, and MK party by that time should be presiding over the government of KwaZulu-Natal.
From that moment on, MK's public posture shifted from assertive to agitated, from principled to critic, to constant disruption, with parliamentary rules treated less like binding frameworks and more like inconveniences imposed by hostile forces. And slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, the narrative began to change from new opposition voice to unpredictable political wildcard. A transformation that would prove costly once the spotlight moved beyond theatrics and onto consequences. Then November 2025 detonated the story completely when allegations emerged that South African men had been recruited under false pretenses for what they were told was security training in Russia, only to find themselves in active war zones linked to the Ukraine conflict, dodging live fire, digging trenches, and discovering too late that opportunity had been replaced by survival. A revelation that dragged the story out of domestic politics and into the international arena with disturbing speed. As families came forward describing how their sons were misled and pressured, and as survivors recounted being treated as expendable labor rather than trained professionals, the gravity of the allegations shifted public reaction from disbelief to outrage. Because this was no longer about internal party discipline or parliamentary conduct. It was about the exploitation of vulnerable people, and when the name Duduzile Zuma Sambundla, an MK MP and Zuma's daughter, became linked to the recruitment network, the damage multiplied instantly, collapsing any remaining buffer between party scandal and national shame. International media coverage amplified the story, exposing the uncomfortable irony of South Africans allegedly being funneled into a foreign war while the country maintains an official posture of neutrality, and the silence, defensiveness, or delayed responses from within MK during the early stages only deepened suspicion, as the public watched a party that claimed moral authority struggle to articulate basic accountability. Resignations followed, police investigations were launched, and court appearances became unavoidable, forcing MK into a reactive posture where every denial was undermined by new information, and every attempt to frame the scandal as political targeting rang hollow against the testimony of affected families, because once human suffering enters the frame, spin loses its power. Instead of allowing the moment to reset the party's tone, December arrived with fresh confrontation, as MK tabled a motion of no confidence against KZN Premier Tamin Tuli, a move that, had it been handled with discipline, could have been an opportunity to reassert political seriousness. Yet the motion failed. What followed erased any remaining doubt that internal control had fractured. The legislature descended into disorder with shouting, obstruction, and scenes that suggested elected officials believed that democracy itself could be physically delayed or intimidated. And when even members of the economic freedom fighters became entangled in the chaos, it underscored how completely the moment had spiraled beyond principled protest into spectacle. When the speaker enforced disciplinary measures and suspended 36 MPLs without pay, the reaction from the MK was not introspection but outrage, not apology but accusation, framing the enforcement of rules as persecution while simultaneously proving why those rules exist. Launching legal threats and issuing ultimatums that ignored the simple fact that disorder carries consequences in any institution that expects to function. By the time Christmas arrived, public fatigue had set in, because South Africans were no longer debating MK's vision or policy positions. They were watching a pattern repeat itself: scandal followed by denial, disruption followed by punishment, outrage followed by escalation, and the cumulative effect was the quiet erosion of trust, not just in one party, but in the idea that opposition politics could still offer stability and direction. By the end of 2025, the MK party was no longer defined by what it opposed or promised, but by what it repeatedly failed to manage: discipline, restraint, and responsibility. And once a movement becomes better known for court appearances than policy proposals, for suspensions than solutions, recovery becomes a steep uphill climb. This saga stands as a warning, not only to MK, but to any political movement that mistakes noise for power and disruption for progress. Because while chaos can attract attention, it cannot build institutions, And when accountability finally arrives, it does not negotiate with outrage. This is Mzansi Roast News, where we slow the story down so the damage becomes clear. And if this made you pause, feel uneasy, and wonder how quickly things can unravel, then subscribe. Because in South African politics, the next chapter is never smaller, never quieter, and almost always arrives before anyone has learned the lesson.